Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. Thanks for coming today. We are here talking about skills, not titles, and rethinking veteran hiring. Today, we have Ben Reed calling in from London, England, and he is an ex-Army aircraft tech, and a startup founder and CEO of Building Redeployable, which I personally am so psyched to hear about. So welcome today. Thank you for coming, Ben. How are you?
Hi Wendy, how you doing? I'm great, thank you. I'm great. The UK is wet and miserable. Um so it's good. We're kind of dealing with the traditional 6 month UK weather of rain before hopefully it gets sunny at some point in June.
Oh, good. Well, I hope you get through it very, very quick. I checked out, your information, and I used to volunteer, and still do, with veterans, teaching them how to interview and how to get back in the workplace, the private workplace or public in some cases. So this is so near and dear to my heart. You transitioned from being an Army aircraft technician to a startup founder. That's a huge jump there, and the CEO of Redeployable. What did your own transition teach you about how employers misunderstand veteran skills, or more so like the translation gap? And how did that inspire you to build Redeployable?
Yeah, great question. It was never planned when I left the military. There was never an aspiration to start a business. So I just want to put it out there for anyone who's leaving. You might have all the plans in the world, but you don't know what's going to happen along the journey. So I was super fortunate that I had a brother and a sister who'd served as well, and my brother was in tech, and I always knew that I wanted to jump into tech when I left. So that's kind of, not a traditional transition, right? I was fixed aircraft for 12 years and I wanted to move out and sell software. So that kind of whole journey was super interesting to try and land in a job that could teach me some things where I'd get a certain level of responsibility, and using that initial role as that learning journey to then transition to where I wanted to go. So that first job I had was great. I did it for 18 months, but it wasn't the end goal in my eyes. I wanted to get out there and move into software. So you don't know when you're leaving the military is the reality. You're in the kind of bit of a bubble. You don't really know what's going on in the outside world. Even like how to dress, right? Like even silly things like that is like what the questions you're asking when you get out. So on reflection, I would say I did it. I I was lucky in a sense, but there wasn't very much thought in the way that we think about things now in terms of transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in the United States, there are millions of veterans in the workforce, or at least trying to get into the private or public or even a nonprofit workforce. I looked up some statistics for the US from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it said that there are approximately 16.2 million veterans in the US civilian workforce alone. And then in the UK, there are 2.2 million military veterans living in Great Britain. And they estimated around 75 to 80% are working age veterans. So that's a lot of people that, our listeners who are in HR and small business owners and managers who are always saying, please let me hire good people. Hello, this is where we can dive into, is looking at veterans, right?
Yeah, I just think it's super challenging. I think it's challenging for recruitment teams, HR leaders, L&D teams to assess anyone from a non-traditional background.
Yeah.
I've worked in data centers and I want to move into another position in a data center. Like I think there's all the will in the world, but I think sometimes they just don't have the processes in place to like really be able to assess somebody's fit and be able to bring them in. It's a challenge.
So tell us a little bit about redeployable and how this can help um, both sides, the workers and the people, the companies that are looking to hire that just don't understand the veterans' skills. And there's a huge, like I call it the skill translation gap of saying, okay, we have these skills, but they're in, military terms. And now we need to translate them into what HR managers go, oh, yeah, that was totally what I was looking for.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, the resume doesn't do anyone any favors, does it? Let's be honest. I know it's a necessity and like, it's a requirement for applying for a role and it's what we do, but it varies in quality. AI can generate a resume pretty easily now, tailored to a specific job
Yes.
description. So recruitment teams are finding it tough in terms of sifting through what is a good application versus a bad application. And then for an individual, at the age of 28, I'd never written a CV, a resume in my life. Like, it was the first time. So you're kind of making it up and hoping you get the best possible advice. So that again varies in quality. So I'd say, like, first and foremost, the challenge is around what skills does an individual have?
Right.
And I'm not even talking about the employer understanding that initially. We build for the candidate. We build for the person who's in that career discovery, career transition phase. And we want them to understand what skills they've developed and technical, operational, leadership, what equipment they might have worked on and what that means from a skill perspective. So that's where we start. That's kind of the infrastructure, the starting point for every individual that comes to us. And then that then allows us to build off of the skills that that individual has to be able to then effectively over time translate that into the world of a specific career field or employer that individual is interested in going into.
I love it. So it's basically a military skills translator for people who don't know military terminology, which is most of businesses and HR folks. I mean, we do have a lot of people that were veterans, but let's face it, that's not what we're looking for, a totally different skill. So it's a translator. That's so cool.
Yeah, I would say yes, it is a translator. We try and take it a step further. So rather than just translating the skills, we want to tell the individual what skill, where they're gaps related to a specific role, and we do that. We can tell them what courses they should think about going away and doing if they're really interested in a type of role, but also starting to highlight that to the employers to help them understand in terms of onboarding, where that person you need to focus the time on that individual when you bring them in. Because if you think about that, it's all nice to do from a business perspective, but
Right.
like they're looking for an ROI. And to me, the ROI is having a fully optimized, utilized employee as quickly as possible who's happy in role and stays for a long period of time. That's kind of the win for every organization. So we really try and use the data that we collect along that journey of that career transition to help the employer not just understand fit, but understand how you can most effectively get that person up to speed and productive in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I love your work, by the way, and I want to, continue to challenge these outdated HR or hiring teams assumptions. You've said that veterans are often pushed towards generic career paths like project management. What does your data show veterans actually want from their civilian careers?
Oh, everyone's different. If you think of it like the best analogy is like in tech. You say I work in tech, and you could work in tech, but like you could be a software engineer and I could be a salesperson and the next person could be a product manager and the next person could be a marketer. Like everyone's a veteran, but like my sister she drove big diggers and she was super senior in rank. I fixed aircraft and my brother shot big guns. That's the best way to describe it. So like he's in the artillery. So like we might be veterans, but we're wildly different in
Yeah.
terms of our skills and our seniority and our experiences. So it really depends on the individual in terms of where they go. We kind of because the systems you kind of get like the communities you mentioned it earlier on huge. It's a big, huge community, but it's also quite small in a sense of like people talk and you see kind of trends. So people go down the project management path or cyber and they're good careers, But what I see is like when people get their perspective opened, you help them understand where careers are going, how much you could earn over time. Actually, it starts to broaden the horizons for people and they follow different paths, like going into sales or going into become a chief of staff, or there's all sorts of different avenues people follow.
Yeah, I mean, I could say I'm in tech because I have clients that are tech, so I'm HR in tech,
Yeah.
but don't ask me to set up some kind of technology system because if there's really step-by-step instructions, I might be able to do it. But other than that, I'm not going to understand. I was literally trying to figure out my RSS feed this morning for connecting my company blog to the LinkedIn post. And I was like, what's an RSS feed? And I Googled that and I found it, but somebody in real tech would have known that
Yeah.
automatically.
Yeah, 100%. I'm the same. Like, there's lots of things I can't do, and I'm in tech. I think it's like the cultural thing, right? Like, you kind of know like the tech vibe when you've been in tech. You understand like it's
Yeah.
not like we're not wearing suits generally. It's a little bit more casual. It's a little bit more like I don't know, a bit fresh, a bit young in a sense. Where it's the same in the military. You've all got that culture, that ethos. You've been trained in a certain way, but everyone's different when they're getting out. They're all individuals.
Just like every other human being. So, regardless if they're veterans or non-veterans, you need to treat them as human beings and figure out, okay, what are their actual skills? And for our listeners who are interested in hiring veterans, even if you're not interviewing veterans, but definitely when you are interviewing veterans, you need to be prepared because veterans are they're expecting, a process. They're expected, this is the process of how to get hired in our organization. So winging it is probably not going to get you to hire a veteran or really anybody. I was reading a LinkedIn veteran opportunity report and it said that veterans who find roles aligned with their decision-making skills and their technology skills or technical skills show higher job satisfaction and longer tenure than veterans placed just in generalized management or project management track. So, it is important, like you just said, to get to know the individual and put them in the right role. Don't just hire people just to say, oh, we hire vets, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think that comes down to that's the system perspective, right? Like recruitment teams are super strapped in terms of what they're doing day to day right now. They're smaller than ever, they're having to do more day to day. And the technology out there isn't really equipped to help them understand these skills. So I just see it as like broadly a really super challenging space. But
Yeah.
I really do think with the capabilities from an AI perspective, with all the amazing progress that's going on in the market right now, I think it's just such a great opportunity to start helping them simplify the way in which they assess this talent because they're missing talent is my take on it. Especially where there's critical skills shortages. Like think about the critical infrastructure space, like data centers, building automation, utilities, energy. Like they're crying out for skilled talent, and people are applying, but they're not hearing back, or they're getting
Yeah.
a rejection with an auto reason, reason why, and they don't get any feedback. And I think it's just such a miss, a miss.
It really is. It drives me nuts. I'm the HR lady. I've done pretty much everything in HR and especially recruiting as well. And when I am talking to maybe a client or just a friend who's saying, oh, these resumes I'm getting are, they're horrible. And I'm like, well, are you hiring a resume writer, a publisher, or something like that? No, it's a mechanical engineer. Well, why would you think they'd be an expert at resume writing?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you have to learn how to decipher and decipher the resume, the information on the resume, and ask better questions. So, from what I understand, redeployable focuses on helping employers hire veterans using data instead of assumptions. So, for the HR leaders listening, tell us what signals should they prioritize over degrees, job titles, or again, as you mentioned, the traditional resume.
Yeah, it's a great question. We build job simulations is the way in which we tackle this. So our pathway as an employer opportunity, we are able to determine the gap analysis and also educate the individual on the opportunity. Like what what's the industry like, what's the company like, what's the role like, what you're going to do day to day. So like give them a full idea of what it is. And then we build simulations alongside employers with validation from hiring managers, and they're kind of like task-based simulations about the specific role. So the individual who's trying to determine whether they're even interested in this type of work can actually work through a certain number of tasks. We bring it to life with a ton of imagery and voice and things like that. And they can determine whether they want to do it. Hopefully they disqualify themselves if they don't. So we're not having a bad hire and they're actually pursuing something that fits more with what they're interested in. But we're also then able to determine how they perform within the simulation. And then at that point, the individual shares that data with the recruitment teams. So we now have performance data, enjoyment levels at a task-based level, and also gap analysis. We provide, think of it, resume plus 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 in terms of the information we provide. And because we've validated it with SMEs, hiring managers, we're actually the data is believed, right? The recruitment teams are happy to actually bring someone through into the process because they've performed in that simulation.
Wow. So you're actually using this for skills-based hiring based on data, not just, hey, I paid somebody good money to rewrite my resume, even though it's all BS.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We're not starting with like, the summary that everyone writes. It's like I am a technical leader of 20 years and empathetic and it's the same stuff on every single CV, isn't it? On every single resume.
Yeah, people want statistics. They want data. They want to know, like, hey, can you help my company grow? And how are you going to do that? And in fact, I was reading a report from Harvard Business School, and then there's a similar one from the Burning Glass Institute, and it's about skills-based hiring. Companies using skills-based hiring are 36% more likely to improve employee performance, and not just of the person they hired, but the people around them. And I mean, isn't that what we're in business for? To get our employees to perform so that we can help our customer or our client? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, 100%. You're also then opening up like different experiences and backgrounds into the business, right? And I think you shouldn't hire a whole business worth of veterans, and I'm a massive advocate for hiring veterans, but you want diversity of experience and
Right,
thought, and like that's going to improve performance across the organization. So if you're just so centered on hiring people from the data center industry, if you're a data center organization, you're going to get the same perspectives coming in, whether they worked at Coresight or Equinix or Advantage or Digital
right.
Realty. So I think opening it up and thinking about skills and aligning skills rather than specifically past experience in industry is super important, and it'll give you that diversity of experience and a happier workforce.
Yeah, I know when myself, I'll just give myself an example. I'm not a veteran, so thank you for your service and everybody else who's listening. But I do have a lot of people in my family that are in the military, and I find that they struggle to translate the skills, like you said, from over here military, or even if you worked for a government job before, and now you're trying to go into private or nonprofit organization. And so you're not speaking apples and apples. Sure, AI is definitely there to help you, but you still got to practice it in the interview as well. Because if you're just reading your resume that AI wrote, you're probably not going to get even through the interview process. And then I would like to say on the other side from HR too, if we're just creating AI generated questions, but we don't really know what the answer is supposed to be, then we probably have the wrong people in the interview, right?
Yeah. But that's
Uh,
that's another one of the challenges, right? Interviewing is varies across an organization so much in terms of interview technique and styles, and it's tough. If you would have told me as a veteran or a transitioning service person, at the end of 2017, translate your skills, you would have been talking a different language to me.
yeah.
Like,
You're like,
what
I
are you
have no
talking
clue.
about?
I don't even know what you're
Yeah,
talking
what are you
about.
talking about? It's like it's not something you learn. Like you've not got it's not a muscle that you've been working all the time, right? And
Yeah,
I think to expect a veteran to be able to do that is on their own is super challenging. Now they could do it in a chat GPT or something like that, right? Where they kind
right.
of give it their experience, but the output varies in terms of what it's going to give you. And then you talk. you just nailed it on the head. You can give them the best direction and insight into career fit, but if they've not prepped properly for an interview and you've never interviewed at the age of 28, like it's super challenging. So it all comes into this kind of like reintegration back into civilian life, is that whole career readiness, prep, practice, elevator pitches. There's all sorts of that kind of stuff when you think about this space.
Yeah, I saw your recent post on LinkedIn about partnering with Hire Heroes USA on a joint research report. So tell me a little bit about that.
We're trying to, Hire Heroes. We've been working with them now for a year, and they're an amazing organization out of the US. Um, and we all talk about the fear of losing a job because of AI, right? And
Yes.
I absolutely think it's impacting. It has, and it will continue to impact a lot of white collar work. But what we wanted to do is like flip that and say, what are the careers that we think are going to be long lasting in this space right now, which are resistant to automation, and why do veterans fit into those different areas in the economy? So that was the whole report, was looking at a lot of their historical data on transition and retention information around veterans going into different spaces, and then just giving it that more of a positive spin to say, well, hey, we're all keeping our finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening in the market, but there's a lot of opportunity as well because of AI, and veterans fit perfectly into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure that I have your LinkedIn account in the description of this podcast so everybody who's listening can connect with you and find that out. But what your report says, or your post says, that 6 career sectors where veteran satisfaction is high and automation risk is low: cybersecurity, healthcare, skilled trades, engineering, program and operations management, and supply chain and logistics. And I have worked in almost all of those except for cybersecurity. And I could tell you that AI is not going to be hurting them a great deal anytime soon.
No, I mean engineering. Look at engineering. 30%, 30% of one of our big clients 2 years ago said 30% of their engineering workforce is going to retire in the next 5 to 7 years. Like,
Wow.
and that's physical, mechanical, electrical engineering, and that's the same in maintenance engineers in retail, vehicle engineers in logistics, data center site engineers. It's across the board. So if you think about this retirement cliff that's happening, and then demand, because we need more data centers, we need more power because of the investment in AI. There's just so many opportunities out there, I would say, if people can align themselves with those opportunities and actually land a good role. And the organizations have sufficient infrastructure to bring these types of people in and upskill them where they need to be upskilled.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to recap what you just said, hey, listeners, if you're struggling hiring in these roles, turn to military vets. You may not understand their resume. If they're going through redeployable, you will, but just ask better questions and you will get the answers that you need. I know recruiting is time consuming. It is exhausting, but if we can get through the recruiting process and we get the right people who are able to learn new skills, to be upskills, as he just said, then we're going to have some people that are staying longer. And in fact, Harvard Business School had this statistic that said skilled based hiring organizations are 27% more likely to reduce turnover. And isn't that amazing? If we can hire a vet and we can help them with their skills and maybe help them through the interview process, then we're not going to have to replace them. It's less likely that we're going to have to replace them because they're going to be, in it to win it with you. And wouldn't we all love that?
Absolutely. And
I have
you've invested in them, right? They won't forget that. You've taken the time to bring them into a civilian career, which is one of the most stressful periods of their life. It's a big change from an institution and their friends and where they lived. And you've hired them and invested in them. And I think that a lot of veterans will remember that if it is the right career for them.
Absolutely. And then they'll brag about you to your friends. And guess what?
Yeah.
Your recruiting budget just went down. So, all right, Ben, I have one more question. So, your data suggests that when veterans find roles that engage their judgment, their autonomy, and their technical ability, they stay longer and advance further. Yay. What changes should our HR leaders make in job design or career development to unlock those advantages?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you've nailed it on the head initially, but like a resume is not going to pull a lot of that out, right? An application, you're going to see a resume, a code application on one of your careers pages, and actually that your current process isn't going to identify some of those things and those experiences that individuals bring in. So just a real long, hard look at how you're assessing these types of people coming in. And I'm not just talking about veterans, right? Anyone's flipping career, someone could have had 15 years in healthcare, and is bringing so much experience in different areas. So there's that initial piece. And then when you onboard someone from the military, I don't think you should disregard their leadership experience. Like they've spent years, at a very young age leading people, regardless of what they did. You're given a lot of responsibility at a very early age, and you go on a lot of leadership courses, right, where you learn how to lead individuals in high pressure environments. So a lot of what we called out in that report is all about kind of working under high pressure, having that element of autonomy in terms of the work because you're having to make decisions in adverse environments and leading people. And I think you give people the opportunity when they land, especially from a leadership perspective. I think they'll thrive. So that's probably my takeaway from the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fact that veterans are less likely to voluntarily quit jobs compared to non-veterans. So it's important for our listeners to understand that this doesn't just check the box of I have the role filled. It also helps check the box of I have the role filled for the long term. And yes, they may need some training and development, but guess what? We all do.
Yeah.
If we get the right person, though, it's going to solve so many problems of things that are missing in our organization. Unfortunately, when we hire the wrong person, according to SHRM, a poor hiring or role fit decision costs employers roughly 30 to 33% of employees' annual salary. Ouch, that's a lot of money. Oh, so Ben Reed, startup founder and CEO of Building Redeployable. How can people connect with you?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so it's Ben Reed, READ. So that's probably the main area you can grab us, or go to our website redeployable.io, and you can get in touch there. But we're a technology company, but we've got a lot of great people in the background. So reach out to any of us. Be happy to have a chat.
That's awesome. I'll make sure that I have the redeployable link in the podcast notes, as well as Ben's LinkedIn profile. And I also wanted to share for our listeners that if you feel you are being ignored at work, we at Aurora Training Advantage have a webinar session for that. I'm actually the presenter. Check it out live or afterwards as a recorded session. Just search for how to deal with being ignored at work. Other than that, I hope this podcast has been beneficial and helpful to you. Take care. Take care, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.